I have no idea what they're doing, but I will tell you this. You know, God is looking down on all this, and if they are not doing everything in their power to save people, they are going to pay the price. Because every day that we delay, people are dying. And they're dying by the hundreds, I'm willing to bet you.
Welcome back to Inside City Hall. That was the anguished voice of then Mayor of New Orleans, Ray Nagin, days after Hurricane Katrina almost completely destroyed the city. 6 years later, Nagin has written his harrowing account of New Orleans' battle for survival in the wake of the hurricane and the political storm that soon followed. It's called Katrina's Secret: Storms After the Storm. It's going to be released tomorrow, and Ray Nagin's here with us. Thanks for coming back to the program. Good to see you.
It's good to be back with you guys, and especially good to be back in New York.
Now, what made you decide to do this? I mean, there's some surprises, and we're going to get to those in a minute, but what was your motivation for trying to set this
Well,
off?
you know, I left office. I was term limited in May of 2010, so my initial intent was just to put together a personal library. And then as I started to delve into this story and refresh my memory, it just struck me that this was amazing and that all of the information that's out there about Katrina is not necessarily accurate. So I wanted to put together this book, and hopefully people can learn from it.
Okay, well, we'll get into some of what people think is accurate that you can clear up for us, but just a couple of the stories, and it's just full of them. Wandell, one of your bodyguards, looking at television, he sees a house, he realizes it's his dad's house. He dashes out into the storm. In the midst of all the confusion, we're dealing with Hurricane Katrina, the realization that the mid-city section of the city was flooding. And then somebody came in with some pictures, and they were showing them to us. And all of a sudden, my bodyguard just goes quiet. And I walk over to him, and I said, well, what's going on? He said, man, that's my dad's house. And the water's almost up to the roof. So he, being a police officer, didn't really want to leave me. I said, man, what are you doing? Go save your dad. Long story short, he gets there just in time. His dad and his uncle are up, elevated on a kitchen counter, and he saves them and brings them back. Now, you talk a lot about the evacuation and the planning that went into it, and normally 60 to 70%, you say, of getting everybody out of the city is considered good. You had a plan, and it looked like you were going to get 80+% out. It even exceeded 90%. The problem is, in a city of almost 500,000, that still leaves tens of thousands of people behind.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I bring out in the book. You know, we were able to get out about 95 to 96% of the people who were in the city, or get them out of harm's way. Unfortunately, there was still 4% left. No other city has been able to do that we can tell. Just think if you had to evacuate New York City in a matter of hours. I don't think you would be able to do it. But what was left was people on roofs, you know, in the water that we had to go and rescue, and that's where the drama unfolded.
And behind the scenes, there was infighting between you and Kathleen Blanco, who was the Democratic, you're a Democrat, she was a Democrat governor at the time, and you traced it back possibly to the fact that you had endorsed her opponent against her.
Yeah, I was a new mayor, fresh into politics, first time being mayor of being in an elective office. So I took them through a process to write me a letter on what they would do for the city, and Jindal wrote a better letter, and I decided to go with him. So there were some residuals. I don't think that was the main reason why she didn't respond. I just think that the incident was just so catastrophic that it overwhelmed all of us.
Now, I have talked to people who made a couple of different documentaries. Harry Shearer is one, Leslie Carday is another, and they attribute a lot of the problems, the actual flooding, not simply to the levee construction, but to the Mr. Go, the Mississippi River Gulf outlet, that funneled water into the middle of the city, and also over time had eroded the wetlands that would have protected the city. What do you think?
That was a big part of the issue. Hurricane Katrina came up the Gulf of Mexico, and she was a Category 5 at one time. And by the time she hit us, she was down to a Category 3. But the big problem with a hurricane is this storm surge. She pushed that storm surge over the Mystico, which was land that had been cut for ships to cut through from the Mississippi River to Lake Pontchartrain. And that was eroded. So that storm surge had nothing to slow it down, and that's what caused a lot of the levees to breach.
Well, let's talk about some of what else went on. You had to tell this unbelievable, harrowing story. We'd heard all of these crazy stories about what was going on in the Superdome, which is where you brought people who were unable to get out of the city. But apparently there was going to be an insurrection. They were going to take over weapons. What was that about?
Some people were going into an infirmary that we had set up next to the Superdome in the arena, and they let us know that there was a plot Some of the young guys were tired of not having enough food, not having enough water, and they had marked their hats or their shirts, and they were going to create a diversion. And one day they did it. So there was a shot that was fired underneath the people, and we went running up some flights of stairs, and thank God we were able to contain it. But the next day, it was hot. The people were frustrated because the buses weren't there. And they were pressing on the barricades and about to overrun the National Guard. Keep in mind, there were 30,000 people in the Superdome, 300 National Guards. Wow. So if they could have done it, they would have, if they had the power. But a rain cloud came over the Superdome, and I think it's God's intervention. I don't know if you believe in that or not, but God's intervention, it cooled the people off, the tension went down, and some of them even went back in the Superdome, and we lived to fight another day.
Let's talk about the federal response. You made clear that even though FEMA you had requested from the federal government in advance hundreds of thousands of MREs, the meals ready to eat, 40,000+, I guess, bottles of water. And it was pretty clear that they weren't going to deliver that as requested.
Like I said, this storm overwhelmed just about everyone. FEMA, the federal government, state, but they didn't deliver what we wanted. We knew that we would have to at least last for 3 days. We wanted enough supplies for that. They only gave us supplies to last for 1 day. So therefore, the drama unfolded.
Wow. And then, of course, in the aftermath, the horrible stories. And in fact, the Danziger 7, the 7 police officers go on trial tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes.
What happened with the police? You talked some about the police chief Compass really kind of losing it, so they're not really being in command.
He lost a friend to suicide. The guy shot himself in the head in the middle of everything that was going on, and I think Compass was almost right there when it happened, and that kind of tipped him over a little bit. The police department, for the most part, most of the police officers were great. There was a small group that for either racial reasons or hate reasons or whatever, took it upon themselves to create some horrific acts. There's already been a small group that has been convicted, and now we've got this big case coming up.
Do you expect to be called in that trial? Are you going to be part of that?
I have not been called in any of those because, I was pretty much removed from that in the command center, dealing with a whole bunch of issues besides the police.
If you could go back, what's the biggest thing you would have done differently?
Wow, there's so many things. I mean, going through something like that, I think the first thing is the mandatory evacuation. We had never done one in a almost 300-year history of New Orleans. I did it on a Saturday night after talking to Max Mayfield, the head of the Hurricane Center, and I could have called it that night, but I waited for the city attorney to get all the paperwork together. So I wonder about that all the time. Suicides went up dramatically, deaths went up. So I should have paid more attention to the post-traumatic stress disorder that affected our citizens. And then I think finally I should have pushed the federal government and state government to immediately implement somebody like a General Honore as the head of the recovery, and I think things would have moved faster.
It's amazing. You talk about when George Bush came and gave his speech, the president, in the wake of it, and that after it was over, they literally turned off the lights and took him with them.
Let me tell you, the biggest, I want to say deceptive, but it was kind of a facade. They came in, they did the speech at night, they lit Jackson Square up to make it look like New Orleans was okay, and it really wasn't. After the speech, they collected all the equipment, and keep in mind, New Orleans was still dark. There was no power. We needed some of that lighting equipment. They took it and left.
But I mean, in a very real sense, a lot of what I think people will find amazing in this book is that you're the head of a major American city. You're the elected head of a major American city. You're asking for stuff from your colleagues in government, whether it's the governor or the president of the United States, and they're blowing you off.
That's the thing that's so frustrating. I mean, I took a lot of heat because people say you're the mayor, you're supposed to make things. I utilized just about every bit of resources I had. I stretched my police and my fire where they were working almost 24/7. So you would have thought that once a city had reached that point of being totally exhausted, that the feds and the states would have stepped in. But the governor, who was a Democrat, the president, who was a Republican, were fighting over control of the resources for the response, but more importantly, the billions of dollars that was coming later for the recovery. And they were using some ancient act law called the Posse Comitatus Act.
Sure, I remember the debates of whether or not they had the power to overrule Blanco and do things in the state.
President Bush always had that power. As a matter of fact, she never gave him permission to came in, but he came in anyway later.
What's the main lesson you hope one of your successors will take from this?
Well, I think the main thing is how to be better prepared for a disaster. I think our evacuation processes are much better. As a matter of fact, one of the key things that kept people from leaving, besides not being able to, was pets. Now we have a separate pet evacuation process to get people's pets out in a good manner. I think that's one thing. And secondarily, what to do if the big one actually happens. We no longer wait for the federal government. We get everybody out before. There's no shelters of last resort.
Are you planning a return to public life? I know you're back in the private sector.
You know, I don't think so. I mean, if it wasn't for Katrina, maybe, but Katrina took so much out of me. And right now, I'm really focused on getting people to learn from this experience so it won't happen again. There are many, many disasters happening almost daily, and they're becoming much more intense, and they're being linked on natural disaster with a man-made disaster, which is doubling the problem. So I hope people can learn from this.
Very interesting. Well, the book is out. Katrina's Secrets is the name of it. Self-published. So this is every word you wrote yourself.
Create space through Amazon. You can get it in Amazon, iBooks, you name it. You can order on Amazon.com.
Very good. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you so much.
It's time for a break. I'm going to be back in a minute with a preview of tomorrow night's program. We'll also look at some viewer mail. Stay with us.